What you wanna know?
What's going on, people? Myke C-Town here with another episode of What Do You Want to Know, where you ask your questions. If I like your questions, I answer your questions on camera. So, I need more questions. Make sure you guys are sending those to ctownwdywk@gmail.com. Don't forget, get on it, tight. Let's jump right into it. This Berlin SQ Love, I don't know what that is, but he says, "Hey Myke, thanks for sharing your record collection and your knowledge of music in general. I got into some great bands thanks to you. I was wondering if you could delve into how you got into dark wave, cold wave, post-punk, industrial, etc., and the goth culture in general. Was it common for hardcore kids to like that type of music as well? What drew you to it? And could you share some favorite older and newer artists as well?" This is actually a good question, man, although it's a little bit convoluted, so I'll try to stay on focus here, but I don't really remember exactly how I got into the goth stuff, but I know Atlanta had a pretty open-minded hardcore scene back in the day. You know, everyone pretty much listened to shit outside of hardcore and punk, so naturally, you know, due to the people that I was around, that stuff filtered into my ears, but I was already pretty open before discovering punk rock. You know, I was listening to everything from Nirvana to Ice Cube to Fishbone to Razkaz. But when I first got into the hardcore scene, you know, we were all listening to pop punk, crust punk, grind, some metal, and we started listening to some post-punk, emo, etc. We listened to everything, man. But I found goth later on, but in the beginning I did like some death rock bands. It's just at the time I didn't know that death rock was kind of different than punk. You know, I didn't know that Christian Death wasn't simply a punk band. I didn't know that the Cramps or Bauhaus or Joy Division or Specimen weren't punk bands. I mean, they were punk bands, but I didn't know that it was a totally separate subgenre that was a lot darker. I just thought it was all punk rock. But I got more into goth around the time my band broke up, so this was around 2001. I listened to goth music, but I wasn't super immersed in it at the time. I think what was the biggest turning point for me with goth stuff was Moonspell. Moonspell was one of the first black metal bands that I really got into. I was obsessed with the album Wolfheart. Then Irreligious came out, Sin Pecado, and it was like they got more and more goth, and at the same time, so was I. And I started listening to more and more stuff that was associated with goth culture, so more Sisters of Mercy, Rosetta Stone, The Mission, Wake, these kind of bands, and I was already obsessed with The Cure and Depeche Mode. But then I got more into the synth pop side of goth, so I was listening to stuff like V&V Nation, which was my favorite band for a long time. I also got into Covenant, Poptigma Berserk, Wolfsheim, Wumpscut. And then thanks to my boy Henry Derrick, I got into stuff that was kind of indirectly connected to the goth scene, so stuff like Swans, Current 93, Death in June, Coil. You know, I also got put on to Fields of the Nephilim by him, who became one of my favorite goth bands. But as far as industrial goes, I was also listening to stuff like Front 242, Skinny Puppy, of course, some Big Black. But this was during the time when I had like super long hair. I wore black all the time. I always wore a trench coat. I started wearing fucking eyeshadow. Like, I looked crazy. I really wish I had pictures of me back in those days, but I also used to live walking distance from this club called The Chamber, which was Atlanta's main goth club. So I used to hit that place with the homies all the time, including Henry Derrick. But I also used to go alone. Like, whenever I got the urge, I'd just go and hang out. I didn't dance all that much, but I still had a pretty good time, which is really weird because I was straight edge back then, and that scene was very drug heavy. I didn't drink, drugs, nothing, so I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But my time at the goth club in general was really interesting. Goth culture is very interesting. It's one of the most accepting and open cultures that you'll run across. And it was here that I became more acclimated with the gay community. It's here that I really cohabitated with that community. It's here that I actually became friends with a trans person. And, you know, it's one thing to be supportive of a certain group, but it's a different story when you actually become, like, directly associated with members of that group, especially when you're young. When you're young, you're more supporting an idea than an actual person or group of people. So after meeting these folks, I became even more open to the idea of gay rights and trans rights. The cool thing is you can come to a goth club looking literally like anything without the fear of judgment, and I thought that was great. And I don't know that I would be as open a person to all different types of people as I am currently without my time at goth clubs. And not only was it gay and trans and race positive, but it was also very sex positive. So unlike other scenes like the hip hop scene, the metal scene, and anything else, a woman can come there and sleep with 3 guys that weekend, essentially do what a lot of men do, and you would never hear someone call her a whore or a slut. At least not in some kind of detrimental way, and certainly not by the men there. So that was also really cool. And of course, you had the fetish side of things, so that significantly reduced the odds of people being judgmental. It's kind of hard for you to judge me and my sexual partners when 10 minutes ago you had some motherfucker drinking Grand Marnier out your asshole in the corner. Now, of course, the goth scene isn't perfect. There was a lot of drama. Since it was a haven for all types of people, people who were shunned by other groups, you had a lot of random personalities that may not always be easy to deal with, but you just accepted them, and no matter how annoying you might find them, you just dealt with it. Sometimes certain people wouldn't get along, but it was for dumb shit most of the time, like whose life is spookier, whose life is worse, like who wants to die sooner, like who's more goth than who's a big fucking poser. There was also this small scene of kids who were really obsessed with World War II, and not just from a historical standpoint or just from a shock value standpoint. They were the weird kids who were more into like the martial industrial side of industrial music, but they still kind of gravitated towards the goth scene. They wouldn't really cause any problems at clubs or shows, so it wasn't like a huge deal. But the goth scene, it can also attract certain personality traits that some can see as negative. I met a lot of people who were into self-harm, and I think these type of people gravitate towards the goth scene because it's a scene that's known for its obsession with depression and negativity. So it gives these people a safe place that they feel like they didn't have before, and it's also a place where they wouldn't be judged for these types of things. I dated a couple goth girls. I was always really, really attracted to goth girls. I still am extremely attracted to goth girls. But a couple of the goth girls that I dated back then, they were cutters. Fortunately, they've gotten over this issue. Otherwise, I wouldn't even mention it. But one of them is actually a longtime friend of mine who speaks out about her past very openly, which I think is great. She does watch my videos sometimes. If you are watching, remember that time that you punched me in the nose and bloodied my shit up at my mom's house over some bullshit? Remember that? Yeah, goth girls be tripping, bruh. So I kind of lost interest in the goth scene around the time that Hot Topic got really, really popular. Then the Chamber closed, and the other goth clubs that were around the city, they just weren't as cool, so I kind of navigated away from the scene. But I still go every so often. I still love the music. You just won't catch me out getting my goth dance on like I used to. I don't be tearing it up like I used to, y'all. As far as current bands, there aren't a lot of current goth bands that really, really interest me. There's Lost Tribe, which I think is one of the best. There's Sorrow Dolorosa, which I think is really good. There's the band Trust, definitely Drab Majesty. There's Oh Children. Of course, I love what Cold Cave is doing. There's a band called Terminal Gods. They sound like a modern day Such As a Mercy. Plastique Noir, if they count. But honestly, don't actively seek out this kind of music anymore. As far as synth pop, I don't know. Newer industrial bands, I don't know, man. I talk about those on my vinyl videos, so watch that shit. But yeah, that was my time at goth clubs. I definitely have some really crazy stories, but I'm not sure if those would be appropriate for me to share. If they are, then maybe I'll do a video on that at another time. But yeah, that's it. Make sure you guys send those questions to ctownwdywk at gmail.com. And as usual, thank you for living, thank you for loving, thank you for being you. Please don't die, even though it's the goth thing to do. But just don't do it. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Alright? Peace, bitches!